Hello, hello. All right, let us do what it is that we always do, and that is to be purposeful and to center ourselves and to be in a welcoming energy, a welcoming space. One of the best ways that I know and invite you to explore with me is to breathe deeply, to breathe consciously. Allow that breath to be directed. We can actually direct that breath to any place within our body that might need a little bit of attention. And as we do that, we marvel at the power of choice. We marvel at how that choice is linked to mindfulness, being mindful of the choice, being mindful of the power of directive action, directive thought, directive choice, just by simply directing breath, knowing that this translates into all areas of our life. And so there is never a time, there is never a place, a circumstance where we lose that power to direct through the conscious application of thought, through the pivoting of what it is that we choose to focus on. So right now we pause, we let everything within our human experience just sit to the side for right now, and we come together in a state of receptivity, welcoming in all of the wisdom, all of the love, all of that which is oriented towards solution, all of that that we actually define as an aha moment. And we even smile at that idea, realizing that that which we call an aha moment is probably something that has tried to capture our attention hundreds of times, and we have become still long enough to be able to receive it. And so, yes, those aha moments and the stillness that accompanies that, all of those things now are invited into this sacred space. And breathing in, we look at what is being delivered to us as a gift. We realize that we are always worthy of such a gift, the gift of connection. And so we open up to it now. We lay down all resistance and move into a complete state of allowing. And we say that wonderful mantra, I welcome the wisdom of the ancients to remember through me. You can say that with me. I welcome the wisdom of the ancients to remember through me. I welcome the power of the ancients to flow through me. I welcome the power of the ancients to flow through me. And I welcome the love of the ancients to create as me. I welcome the love of the ancients to create as me. And so we lovingly lay this intention down onto the altar of receptivity, knowing that everything that we have already uttered, everything that we have already prayed and affirmed is already in existence. And so we receive it now, joyously, gratefully. So it is. So it is. Good morning. So many wonderful, familiar people logging on. It's wonderful to see you. Anyone who is closely in my sphere knowingly puts up with a little bit of my OCD. Uh, there's something within the satisfaction of cleaning. There is something within the activity of mowing a lawn, of ironing a shirt, of vacuuming a rug, that brings about an immediate sense of satisfaction, because when you do these things, you see that result. When you're mowing the grass, you can see in that instant the result of your effort. When you're ironing the crease out of a shirt, you are able to see that. When you vacuum the rug. And so that kind of trying to understand what that feeling is, that feeling of satisfaction, I think is a beautiful tool, because it's an invitation to say that that feeling of satisfaction, or that feeling of recognizing um, order, accomplishment, um, reward, if you will, is not something that is held in a place of futurization, that it's a constant. And so there are many different ways in which to dance with this idea that everything is perfect, that everything is in divine order. And I, in full transparency, realized that in my younger years of teaching, that there was a recklessness within my understanding of those typical phrases found within metaphysics, that everything is God, that everything is divine order. And when I say that there was a recklessness to it, what I'm really trying to own up to is the fact that my level of embodiment of it was not deeply rooted. It was very much surface. It was something that was pushed at me to learn in a classroom. It was something that was a requirement for me to recite from getting a degree, from getting a divinity doctorate, from any of those kinds of things. That was a part of the path, was you had to be able to spout that stuff off. But it's taken decades of my life. It has taken experience. It has taken me to, sometimes deliberately, sometimes unconsciously, to place myself into the seeming chaos in order to cultivate deep roots that divine order is the only reality. Do you follow? It's the, again, the Zen phrase that says the obstacle is the path. And so that satisfaction that I would get from those types of activities was a reflection on a desire for me to have that satisfaction. And is it possible to have that satisfaction in all things, even in the seeming chaos, even in the tall grass, even in the wrinkled shirt, even in the dirty carpet? Are you following me? Because the larger metaphor of that is that we live in a world dense in its appearance, that is tall, unruly grass, that is the wrinkled cloth, that is the dirty, stained flooring by which we are having to walk upon day after day after day after day after day. And if we futurize our satisfaction in those particular circumstances, then we are creating obstacles, we are creating predicaments whereby we are postponing being in the now and being connected to God, or being connected to Source in the now. And what does that do? That then gives the power of our connection, our understanding, our oneness to something else, to something external. And so I really have been seeking, longing to find ways to be able to bring this message home in a way that people can get it. I'm working on a book, and I've been working on a book for a greater part of this year, and I'm struggling. I'm struggling because the book in and of itself is about the fact that the only thing that is real is non-duality. Simply translates, means that there is only one capital R reality, which is God, that everything is, that we are all a part of one single organism, and that what affects one affects the whole. And how do we, in the predicament of a human body, come to peace with that? How do we unravel and unlearn all of the things that tell us that we are separate? How do we liberate our own beingness, not just physically, but mentally, from the day-to-day arduous tall grass and wrinkled experience and dirty floor? How do we do that? And that ultimately is the curriculum. That's why you are here. That's why I am here. And we do it, and here's the paradox. We grow in our understanding of non-duality by being in dualistic circumstances, by being in the arena or the appearance of the us and them, by experiencing the fight or flight, by having the seeming dis-ease, by feeling the feeling of abandonment, by having heartbreak, all of the things that are a part of this meaning our human experience. So we can't really fully understand or even have a glimpse of the bliss of non-duality unless we are doing the dualistic dance. So it's kind of like being on a dance floor, and there is the many partners, the dual partners that we keep moving around with, like in square dancing, where you just keep changing partners and changing partners and changing partners, hoping that the next partner is going to be the one that's going to fix it, hoping that the next person that enters into your life is going to be the shining knight on the white horse, or the savior, or somehow anything that's going to deliver, when the deliverer is actually ourselves. It is our perception. And so I'm always looking for ways to bring that more into relatable teaching opportunities. And that's been the struggle with my writing this year, is it gets too in my head. And then I have to go back and do this reductionist process in order to be able to speak it more. So I was thinking about it today, this morning, and my neighbor did something beautiful with wildflower seeds earlier this year, and is still reaping the benefit of that. And we had one of those sort of Americana backyard over the fence conversations about his wildflowers. And so he told me the website, American Meadow, that he went to get the organic seeds. So I ordered some. And so what did I do? I have a persnickety area in my front yard that my OCD continues to do battle with. When I see it, when I see the area that I can't seem to maintain the weeds, when I see this particular thing that in my mind I want it to look a certain way but it isn't, I decided to just throw wildflower seeds in and call it a day, thinking that that would bring the beauty, the long sought after satisfaction. So I did, and it took a while, and there was no rhyme or reason to where I did the thing. And then my neighbor again brought the wildflower planting to his front yard as well, but he was more intentional with it. He created a specific circular boundary, planted those seeds in, so that now all the wildflowers are in this one designated place. Mine, not so much. And so here's the reward that I see every day in my front yard when I come in the driveway. This is just maybe 4 or 5 of the different varieties that are blooming right now. However, they don't grow straight up and behave the way that my OCD nature wants them to behave. They're all over the place. The stems get so long, and then the blossoms can become so heavy that they fall and lean, or the rain will knock them over, but they're continuing to bloom. And I can't find it within my heart to go and to unroot them, because they're still producing flowers, which is still calling the bees. The point is, it looks like a big old mess. It looks like a big old mess with a bunch of flowers. And I keep looking at it going, when, David, will you see the beauty in this mess? And there's a teaching tool. There's a teaching tool. Because there's indoctrination with what is dignified and orderly and right and what is a mess. In the backyard, I have English ivy. It's termed invasive, and so my experience of it is that it's invasive, and I want to try to get rid of it, and it keeps coming back, and it keeps growing up particular trees, and I think about a forest. I think about a place where one plant is not labeled invasive and another plant is labeled beautiful and perfect, but they all have their right and perfect purpose in the ecological system. And and so what I've come to determine is that there's preference. You have a preference with the way in which you want to live, and the spatial arena and the desires of your heart and what it is that you want to do and the geography where you have decided to land and to live. All of these things are a part of preference. And the same is within our system of belief. We have we have a preference on the way in which we think order is supposed to look like. We have we have preferences in the way in which we express our religion, in the way in which we do what it is that we do and behave the way in which we behave. But all of these things are taught. All of these things are indoctrination. And so when we look at dualistic thinking, we have to understand that everything about the us and them is taught us. Do you follow? The idea that these people are wrong and I'm right, the idea of poetic justice. I've been sitting, again, full transparency, I've been sitting with the feelings of certain branches of the government being diagnosed with the coronavirus, and sitting with the feeling of that and just being honest with it. And now bringing in my understanding and my exploration and hopefully my authenticity about non-dualism, and that everything is one organism, and that everything is one, and that the way that I behave, respond to one thing is the way in which I'm responding to myself. And also listening and paying attention to the noise. All of the people who are finding brilliant ways to justify the poetic justice by saying, by calling that which is experiencing the diagnosis as abusive, and that whatever is abusive is deserving. And again, I got to back up, and I have to look at all of this and say, I'm just an observation. I'm not here to tell you how to think. I'm not here to tell you which mode of thinking is right and which mode of thinking is wrong, because I don't believe now that there is such a thing. It's just thought. And if I can be compassionate in observing this thing inside of me that says, some order here, poetic justice, I have to take ownership of that. Again, it's one more layer of an us and them within me that I'm atoning for. And so this isn't about welcoming in abuse. This isn't about welcoming in anything that is detrimental to another. It's about seeking first to understand. And the only thing that I can understand is my own mental process. And the only thing that I can come to terms with is, if I want to be in integrity with the philosophy that tells me that we are one, then I must continue to uproot and look at all of the things that are divisional. I must look at those things, and I must find a way to see where I sit with it. and how much power I have given away to something. And I have said for many, many years that how we do anything is how we do everything. And so I was looking at the flowers, and as I was laughing at the fact that there's such beauty in the seeming chaos that is still in existence in a portion of my yard. As I look at the OCD within me that wants the edges to be perfect, that wants this to look this way and this to look this way, and I go, why? When I look at the way in which I will refold towels so that they'll be perfectly stacked, and I go, where's the satisfaction in that? Where does that come from? And when I can invite myself to find and feel the satisfaction in any place, can I find and feel the satisfaction in the slums of India, where I walk and breathe and cross my fingers and eat and support the many children there through my foundation? When I am with myself as I am ill. Yesterday, when I caught my own reflection and I saw the 10 to 12 pounds that are sitting on my belly as I was trying to walk through the park and as I was trying to exercise, and I was trying to get to something, an ideal of what I think I'm supposed to look like. And noticing that in the wanting to get to something that I think I'm supposed to look like, I'm not loving what is. And the paradox is that when I love what is can be revealed. And it finally brings me to a story again that was always something that New Thought ministers would share, and that was about the woman named Evie MacDonald. And I first learned about Evie MacDonald from the writings of Bernie Siegel, the medical doctor who was very much into body, mind, and spirit connection. And he was friends with Evie, and Evie was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS, sometime around 1979, 1980. And there are many different versions of Evie's story, but Bernie's story, and the one that Bernie published, talked about the fact that basically she had lived this life of, this is what it's supposed to look like. She was a registered nurse. She had very hardened sensibilities about the way things should be. And but one key thing was that she did not love herself, and she did not love her body. She did not love the instrument of who she was. There was always something wrong with everything. So, key point, do you recognize that within your own self? There's always something wrong. And so she gets this diagnosis, and again, many variations of the story, but she's given about 6 months to live, and the doctors told her to just kind of go home and to get her affairs in order. And so Evie goes home, but she's angry. And we're talking major, major rage, anger. And then it dawned on her in about 3 days into this process that if she only had that window of time, then rather than trying to focus on being healed, that she should focus on what's the most optimum way in which I can spend the remaining days of my life. And she started with loving who she was, something that she had never done before. And one of the pieces of the story that I always loved was that she took all of her clothes off in her wheelchair and sat in front of the mirror and just made herself stare at her own reflection. And she sat with all of the loathing. She sat with all of the seeming disorder. She sat with everything and just looked at what she had condemned time and time and time and time again, until eventually she softened. And in her willingness to sit in the seeming disorder and to just be with it without trying to change it, without having an agenda. A memory popped up. And in that memory, it was a piano teacher when she had been a little girl who had complimented her on her hands. And she had said, "Oh my gosh, what beautiful hands you have." That was the portal. That was the portal of moving more into a non-dual experience that what she was a divine expression. That that someone had said her hands were beautiful. So she started to look at her hands and she started to give thanks for her hands. And the story goes that each day she was committed. This was her practice, was to sit in front of the mirror naked and to simply be with what she saw without trying to fix it, without having an agenda, without having a goal, but to just love what is. And then the loving of what is, as she expanded throughout her whole body, the famous story talks about the fact that she regained all of the mobility within her body. At the time, it was documented in medical journals to be one of the first real remissions of ALS that had ever been recorded. Evie went on to be a minister and continued to do and use her life in an expression of simply learning to love what is, to see the beauty, to see the order in everything, which had made a profound impact upon her life. And I did a quick Google search, and it appears as though she is still around to this day. It showed that she had been a minister in the Methodist movement for some 30 years, I believe, and has continued to do great work and has inspired many, many people. And one of the pieces of the story that I heard too that still remains with me is that at some point she stopped telling the story about recovering from ALS. She stopped identifying herself as someone who had been diseased. In other words, that particular expression or the need to label herself in that form grew old and stale for her. And a new identity wanted to be birthed, a new expression wanted to be birthed. So I take all of these things that I've thrown at you today about the seeming disorder, about the domestication of what's right and wrong, about the paradox of being in non-duality, but having to learn what non-duality really is through duality. And just to invite you to become more gentle, more compassionate, more still, to look at why you hate what you hate, to look at why you grieve what you grieve, to look at why you fear what you fear, to look at how deeply rooted there is a belief in loss and that something can actually be taken away from you. To look at all of that, not from the lens of, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, think this way, but to look at and try to understand, where did this come from? Where did I only reserve satisfaction for those three things I listed earlier in the talk with the mowing and the ironing and the vacuuming? Where could I not sit in the dust and the disorder and feel the same dissatisfaction? And those awarenesses become a part of the classroom, become a part of the richness. So I close today in inviting you to lessen your judgments about what you should be doing. Lessen the judgments about what someone else should be doing. And begin to practice the idea that everything is one organism. That there is just as much validity in invasive English ivy as there is in wildflowers that pollinate and bring bees. It's just that you have a preference. And preferences can change. that there's just as much validity in some of the beliefs and practices as someone on the left as there is in someone on the right. That we are all one organism. And this isn't about going and trying to convince or change another person. It's about becoming centered inside of you so that as you show up and you navigate the dance floor of duality, that you don't add to the division, but you bring a peace to the division. That you become the partner on the dance floor that others are attracted to, and they don't know why. They just know that they feel better around you. And I know that you have been around people like that. I have been around people like that. There is an internal vow that is taken that says, I will be a representation of solution. I will live as a vehicle of that which is God. I do not need validation. I do not need to be right. I do not need it to look a certain way, to have a certain appearance of order. I only have to know that within me, I am committed to deepening the roots. And thus we become the ones that we've been waiting for. Thus we become lighthouses in the midst of a lot of human storms. And lest you think that you are not equipped for that, remember, you are not separate from the greatest heart and mind that you find inspiration in. You find inspiration in that heart and mind because that same inspiration is within you. You are not separate from the skill that you think that you need to develop in order to be more in at one-ment with the world, because the skill isn't out there, the skill is already inside of you. But we must lighten up. We must become more compassionate as we do our work. This does not mean that you are soft and a pushover. It means that you and I have once and for all learned the mastery of the combination of power and love, and that they are not exclusive, but they are birthed from the one great expression that I know can be you. Thank you again for being with me today. I humbly thank you for the way in which you have shared your bounty and your good and your belief and your union of generosity with me. And so if you're so inclined, there are ways to be able to do that in the description of this video. Have a blessed week. May you find your own expression and the way to look at your own reflection and begin to love what is. And in the loving what is, you find that you are the catalyst for the change. God bless.